I'm going to tell you specifically why I am incredibly proud of this athletic department. We get into all the happenings and updates on the Xavier Lucas situation. And the basketball team, Justin, just keeps winning. I'm Rajiv. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome into the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajiv and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's show, the situation with cornerback Xavier Lucas may be one of the strangest we've seen, yet also potentially consequential in the future of college athletics. We tell you what we know right now and give you our full take on this weird precedent-setting saga. While we know Lucas won't be on the team next year, a litany of young players will be. We'll tell you the 5 players we think are most likely to be contributors in their first year or second year in Madison. The basketball team has climbed out of an 0-2 hole in the conference to sit near the top of the league at 5-2 and playing some damn good basketball. We'll touch on this past week and what lies ahead for one of the lone bright spots in our sporting world. We are at the Bucky Report on Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, the subscribe button, so you know when we make new content. Justin, a lot of football going on. Our teams aren't in it. How are you? How was your weekend? What's going on?
Pretty good. I didn't really care about any of the football games, although they were good games. I did really, truly enjoy watching Detroit lose. Because now that Green Bay's out, I'm just like, NFC North, you can just all go down. I don't care. So that was a good game, by the way. Dude, Jaden Daniels is good. Like, I did not expect him to be a great NFL quarterback. It's getting hard to believe that he's not going to be a plus quarterback in the league based off of what we've seen in his rookie season. Other than that, I wanted the Bills to win. They did.
I'll tell you what, man. Yeah. Here comes Eric Doherty. Go Birds. Yeah. I'll listen. I mean, I was rooting for the Rams, and I'll tell you why. My brother-in-law is a massive Commanders fan. He was here yesterday. I feel really bad for the Lions. I really do. But I wanted the Commanders to win because he's a big Commanders fan, and I think that's special for him. They have some long-suffering fans, and if you are a Washington sports fan, yikes. So,
I mean, wait a second here. The Redskins have won a Super Bowl far more recently than the Lions have. So
okay, that's fair. That's fair. You're right about that. And the Lions are even worse, but at least we'll see what happens. Listen, as a Colts fan, I know what it's like to be the number 1 seed and lose in the divisional round. I know it happened more than once to me. So yikes, I do feel bad for them, but whatever it is. Listen, so Justin, we've got a lot to unpack. The Xavier Lucas situation. We've done a show about this in the past, but now as the show title is called, UW breaks their silence. And we've got statements from the university. We've got statements from the Big Ten. We have Twitter responses, a myriad of them from Darren Heitner, the lawyer for Xavier Lucas. So just to catch everyone up, I'm going to go through what was said, and then Justin and I will kind of give you our take on it, and we want to hear all of your comments. If you're listening to this later, put your comments in the comments. Talk about what you think about the situation. Do you think Wisconsin's on the right, the wrong? What do you think we should do? I'm very curious to hear what people have to say. As you know, in December, Xavier Lucas entered the transfer portal. He chose to leave Wisconsin and go to Miami. And then, of course, Wisconsin would not allow him to officially enter the portal. In comes Darren Heitner, in comes Twitter all over the place talking about how there were issues. Wisconsin stayed pretty silent. And now, and we heard rumors, we heard rumblings about what had happened. There was a contract signed. Well, finally, Wisconsin has come out and cleared the air to an extent. So let me just walk you through what all those are. I'm not going to read verbatim, of course, but paraphrase a bit. So first, Wisconsin's statement basically says, we are disappointed that Xavier Lucas has chosen to withdraw from the University of Wisconsin. He's been a valued member of our football program, and we were looking forward to helping him continue to grow as a student, person, and football player. On December 2nd, Xavier and Wisconsin Athletics entered into a binding 2-year NIL agreement reflecting his strong commitment to continuing with the Wisconsin football program. He says, we understand that he also executed a separate agreement with the Varsity Collective. So then it kind of goes on to talk about the simple fact that, there's an expectation, Justin, of course, that this is, met on both sides, that the contract is honored, that this is a legal and enforceable, agreement. He says under the terms of the agreement between Xavier and Wisconsin Athletics, it remains in effect and enforceable. Not only did Wisconsin come out with a statement, the Big Ten Conference has come out in support of Wisconsin, saying the Big Ten Conference stands in full support of University of Wisconsin regarding the contractual agreement between student athlete Xavier Lucas and the Wisconsin football program. As student athletes become active participants in revenue sharing, it is critical that agreed to obligations be respected, honored, and enforced. Basically, it just continues to go on and says that, look, this is an issue. Miami potentially has tampered here. They do bring up, says these actions undermine the efforts of its own conference as the ACC continues its collaboration with the other A4 conferences in developing a sustainable framework for college sports. Last thing I'll show you up here is from Darren Heitner. He is the lawyer of Xavier Lucas. I'm going to just read a couple of these sort of bullets. The first one says there are many issues with Wisconsin's statement. It cites a binding 2-year NIL agreement, but current NCAA rules do not currently allow institutions to provide compensation in exchange for an athlete's NIL, and the agreement says it is subservient to the NCAA rules. The other one is number 6 here. Wisconsin has made serious allegations about impermissible contact without providing any evidence. It is speculating in the same way that many have publicly speculated that Wisconsin communicated with other players before they entered the transfer portal. That's sort of a lay of where things are right now.
I want to weigh in on that real quick because that is such a moronic take from him saying that, like what he's saying there. Why would Wisconsin, if this is going to go to litigation, put their case out there in public? If he wants to get on his soapbox and spout off here like an idiot, that's fine. There is no benefit whatsoever, Wisconsin being on the prosecution side, to put their case out there for him to build a defense to it. It would be stupid of them to put out there and illustrate exactly what they're attacking. So I don't understand what he thinks is going to come. Like, what are they supposed to do? Just paint it out there and give you like a giant like pamphlet of what exactly they're going to actively pursue in this litigation? Like, come on, let's be serious here. Like, what he's trying to put out there and act like they're trying to withhold information is just what anyone would do in this regard.
So listen, I mean, I have been pretty consistent on my take on this for quite some time. I said from the very beginning that initially it was, well, this might look bad for the university. It's going to hurt us in recruiting. Let's not engage in this. But I said from the beginning that I think that it's not just about Wisconsin. It's about the greater good of college sports. And at the end of the day, there's a contract that was signed, and we are not lawyers. We don't know. Obviously, that's going to be litigated by lawyers in a court of law. That's for them to decide. What I do know is that I like this. Look at this. Look at what we're looking at with college athletics right now. You basically have to re-recruit your entire team every single year.
It's creating a culture.
It's creating a culture of college athletics that is not sustainable, that is becoming a bit unwatchable. How many people have you heard just complaining about the fact that, Wisconsin, college athletics is different now. It's changing for the bad. It needs reform, and I am very proud to be a part of the school, to be a fan of the school. That's actually, maybe they do take a hit in recruiting, but they're going to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. We're not okay with this. Knowing full well that Xavier Lucas is not going to play at the University of Wisconsin again. Mm-hmm. And that's already lost. But what is not lost is the fact that they can actually provide real change for college football. Someone has to be the guinea pig. Someone has to do it first. I said from the beginning that I'm all about the fact that Wisconsin is going down this path and fighting this, because there will be a lot of people sympathizing with that as well. It's not just about, oh, it's going to hurt recruiting. It's going to hurt this. It's about doing what's right and actually establishing rules that can be governed, that can govern a sport that has basically no governance right now. The NCAA is a shell of themselves, a shell of their former selves because of
They're
court decisions, and that's fine.
That's it.
But at the end of the day, I'm proud of what this is. And like I said, we have the chance to do something for the greater good. I like what I'm seeing because I don't love this. I don't love the fact that we're dealing with this whole situation, but I do think that rules have to be enforced and things have to change. And if we have to be on the side of, well, we're going to be the ones leading that charge, I think there is some positive to be gained from that as well. And I've been consistent about the fact that I don't agree that it's really going to hurt us. I want us to stand up for what's right. And I think this is the right thing to do, Justin. I really do. And I'm proud of the fact that we are not engaging in like just letting him go. Now, I understand the arguments against. Certainly people saying coaches have different things. They can leave contracts. But the bottom line is whatever it is, there needs to be framework. There is not framework right now, which is why someone can sign a 2-year agreement. And also potentially we've heard some rumblings that, look, this could be enforceable because there might've been language in that thing that says, hey, if the legislation doesn't go through, the varsity collective will pick this up or whatever the case is, or a side agreement that's with the varsity collective as hinted in that statement saying that, we know, and we had written in there that maybe it doesn't get passed, in which case this is enforceable, a 2-year agreement with the varsity collective or whatever the case is. The point is there doesn't need to be this thing where we should just let him go. He's already gone. So why not try to get something for the greater good of the sport?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. With regards to this, like, there's so much that we don't know. Like, the lawyer for Lucas is swearing that no money was exchanged. I've heard some different things in the background. It's all speculation. I can't say which side is being honest. I think it greatly probably benefits his case if he didn't take financial, but we don't know if that's true or not. I get the feeling that Wisconsin's not going to comment on that until it goes to litigation. So I have a hard time believing we'll know for sure what happened in that regard until it goes into some type of case. One of the other things that I took away from his comment that really frustrated me was this asinine comment that the players need more rights. The players are the only ones with rights in this whole situation right now, which is why there's such a massive problem. No one is holding them accountable for anything at this point in time. So they can affect it. We saw this with who was the lineman from Alabama that went to Iowa and then jumped back to Alabama. I can't think of his name right now. It was last cycle. Went there, took a bunch of NIL money, went back to Alabama, and Iowa was just without it. That should not be happening. Like, this is the problem with Caden Proctor. Yes, Caden Proctor. This is exactly the type of problem that we have where everyone's bending over backwards to go, oh, poor players, oh, poor players. And it's like, well, yeah, we want to make sure the players are taken care of, but we also want to make sure that they're not just screwing over teams in this. We can look at this from we're kind of the haves in this situation. Look at the teams that can't afford to have this stuff happen, where a player just decides to bow out and take money and just take off. Wisconsin can get away with it. If they lost a couple $100,000 or whatever for Xavier Lucas or whatever ended up happening in this situation, that's not the end of the world for Wisconsin. You go look at some of those schools that are in Group of 5 that may be doing something like that. That's a massive hit to them. That might be the bulk of their NIL money for a certain player. So you look at it and it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, there has to be some type of enforceable restrictions to players to not just play the game and be like, I'm going to, as soon as it hits my bank account, I'm leaving town.
Yeah. I mean, look, and you mentioned like the players and their rights. For far too long, players were not getting their correct piece of the pie.
Way too far back.
I'm gonna be really clear on that. I'm all for personally. I'm all for the NIL. I'm all for them getting paid. They absolutely deserve. They make a ton of money for these universities, which is why they should get a piece of the pie, which is part of this whole rev share situation. At least now they're getting some finances, but it has to happen in a ordered way, whether it's the NCAA, whether it's the Big Ten and SEC, a conglomerate of conferences, CBA, whatever it is, it has to happen. This is that starting point. I had also said that I think this will become a national story. This is going to be picked up by ESPN, and it's just going to be like the sort of precedent-setting case. And I think that is starting to happen, and you'll see it. It's more out there than it was before. It's not over, and it's going to continue. But I almost feel like The schools are all lining up behind the conferences. Everyone's lining up behind Wisconsin and saying, okay, let's do this. The players are kind of lining up on their side. And what that leads to, for me, down the line is a CBA, right? That's what's going to end up happening. Yeah. It's a collective bargaining agreement. Potentially you're looking at your rev share stuff, and that's fine. That's good. Just put structure to it and figure out the money situation, whether it was money taken from him or not, whether someone in his orbit took money from Miami, as we talked about on a previous show, like whatever happened, let's get to the bottom of it. I want to move on too. I see comments in there saying, let's move on. Let's talk about football. I want that too. But I also really have said many times on this show that I want the sport to figure this out. And if this is what it takes, then this is what it takes, because it just has to happen.
It's so frustrating to feel like none of these players give a crap about what school they're playing for. And they're just mercenaries at this point, because that's not what everyone fell in love with college football. And it's also made it feel like the NFL, to me personally, my perspective on it is it started to feel like the NFL, where now that players are getting money put in their pocket, they just don't give a crap anymore, and it doesn't matter to them. Whereas we're used to watch these guys who are killing themselves to try to get that opportunity. You now have guys that are getting a little fat off the game a little bit, and it's not necessarily don't feel as driven as they did in the previous generations, because they don't have as much to lose. A lot of these guys are never going to even have to play NFL football, because they may make $1 million plus in college and just be like, all right, I can live off the interest of this, and if I want to get a job to go in line with this too, great. If not, it's not the end of the world if I don't make it to the NFL. I made everything I need to off my college experience.
Let's get some comments in here from the community tonight. Michael Rawson says, it's very telling that the University of Miami hasn't put out a statement at this time. The outcome could greatly hurt Miami in time, unless they really don't care about reputation, prestige. Look, Miami has a long history of issues with the NCAA. KPB Kevin says, now the hardest part will be the MOU. The language I have seen creates a lot of issues, which will have to be litigated. Yeah, I'm all for it being litigated. Either way, whatever the result of the litigation, you're still setting a precedent that hopefully rules and framework can be built upon. L. Mills, once the Big Ten offered support, big pendulum swing. Yeah, I mean, that was big. And obviously Wisconsin wasn't coming out without the Big Ten right behind them. Bo Dragon presents the other side of it, which is a very fair argument. Fickell's on a 5-game losing streak and has a bunch of whack players move on and win some games. His other comments were just about that he has other more important things to do. What I would say is, I agree, Fickell can focus on that. But the athletic department, the university can have this litigation battle. And if it puts more light on Wisconsin and what Luke Fickell's trying to do, so be it. I mean, I guess that's ultimately what I want to say.
What I'll say regarding it is simple. Luke Fickell's not concerning himself with this one iota. He's concerning himself with winter lifting and everything else going on right now. This is something that the athletic department is concerned with. It has nothing to do with Fickell. This is a varsity collective in the athletic department that's in charge of this now. This left Fickell's hands the second that he decided to walk out of Wisconsin and stopped answering their phone calls, is my guess. And it probably got picked up from other people who started telling him, yeah, this is not the way you want to handle this. But it is what it is with regards to that at this point. This has nothing to do with Luke Fickell. This is a Wisconsin versus Xavier Lucas battle now. Luke Fickell's handling the football program. Everything else is being handled by athletic department.
Bo says, is this what you want Wisconsin's brand to be? This is what I would say to that, Bo. I'm okay with that, because it brings us to another part of the discussion, which is a fair thing that Bo brings up. What is the worst case scenario for Wisconsin, Justin? In your eyes, what's the worst thing that happens here for us?
I honestly don't think, and other than some bad press, this is not something that's going to matter to players for the most part. The reality of it is Wisconsin's one of the 30 teams that are going to be in these massive conferences, 35 or whatever we're at now. 30, what is it? 36 total.
36, yeah. I think.
So regardless of that, Wisconsin's one of those teams, and they're probably closer to the middle of that pack than the bottom of it. So you look at it, they're going to say, I get an opportunity to play for a team that has a chance to be a good team in one of these conferences. And it's closer to one of my better offers. It's also going to come down to the coaching staff and whether they trust the staff and whatnot. It's going to hit them to some extent. It's not going to be hitting them enough to, I don't believe, greatly impact recruiting in any regard. I just don't see that is going to be like, if you tell a player that's choosing between Wisconsin and maybe say North Carolina or whatever, you might be able to sway them based off of this. If all things are equal, it's not going to be something that you're going to sway a player off of this. If he's like look at how it's been for Wisconsin for a lot of these players in the Luke Fickell era. We're typically on them early and they get their bigger offers late. And if that's the case, these guys are going to be in the fold for a long time. And if you've already sold them and gotten them committed, then it doesn't matter. Like, they've already believed in what you're trying to sell. So I don't really see how it affects things to a great extent. I do think that this actively is potentially going to either be a really feather in the cap of college football, or it's going to send us even further into a spiral, depending on how this is handled.
Boy, that's a very fair point. It could absolutely send us go the other direction, and there's less governance, and then they really can just kind of do whatever you want.
I feel like the second the government got involved with this, it just basically made this a train wreck. I don't know why they couldn't have put stipulations on this to say you need to have a system in place by said date in order to fix this. Instead, we just opened it and we're just like, the floodgates are open. Let's just make this a giant mess. Now, you could absolutely attack the NCAA and college football in general for not having a plan in place when this all happened. As soon as it became a case, they should have been trying to figure something out that they were going to work around this with that was acceptable. It didn't happen. This is where we're at. But this is something that could have been avoided from both fronts. The government could have done a better job of handing this off, and the conferences and everything else could have done a better job of getting their ducks in a row so that this isn't as massive of a garbage heap as it is right now.
When I think about worst case scenario, I don't really see much of anything that's super severe. Ultimately, I'd rather be the school that is starting this and doing like, as you mentioned before, like the prosecuting side of this, not really the defense side, like Miami could potentially be, and they're looking into their program. Ultimately, if nothing happens, if the case is sort of lost and we just lose whatever we had and the agreement meant nothing, then it sets back college football. It doesn't necessarily just set back Wisconsin. It sets back everything.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And I think at the end of the day, the best case side is it does make some real change. And I also want to address one more thing before we move on to a different topic, the tampering thing. Listen, I agree that I don't know what defines tampering in the rules, but I will say, like, is contact made at other schools before while they're still there? Of course. Like, I'm sure everyone does that.
Well, it's not necessarily an issue. Like, if a player reaches out to another school, it's not a problem. It's when you do it without them reaching out to you first.
And because there could have been, again, money exchange on the Miami side of it.
Yeah.
So that's really where it's difficult. And listen, at the end of the day, someone's got to be caught for tampering and have something happen to make a rule be put in place. I'd rather it be them than us. So, I mean, who knows, we could get opened up from all this too. At the end of the day, let's just see what happens. Let's make it better. Not a lot of downside for us. That's sort of my take on it. It's always been my take on it. I don't really see a downside. I only see upside.
Yeah.
And we'll see. We will continue to talk about this in future weeks. Obviously, this story is not going away. I know that it's interesting. I'm very, very curious. Thank you for all the people that are commenting. I absolutely believe that, it's interesting to hear people's takes on this. Put your stuff in the comments. We'll have more shows on this for sure. Let's move on a little bit and talk more football. Justin, you wanted to kind of go through some youth players next year. Talk about what you want to do this segment. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of take a look at this because we've seen all these guys coming into the portal, and we kind of automatically just stamp them into the two deep right away. Well, we brought them in. They've got to be guys that are going to play. I don't necessarily feel that that's going to be the case as much as people think. I think the staff is honestly to the point where they have to play the guys that they feel can take them home and win games. So I think there's going to be a ton of young guys that we see get massive playing time that were freshmen last year, that potentially are freshmen this year, that just are the most talented guy at the position, even if they're not necessarily as refined as you would like them to be. And I think that it would be interesting to go over some of the guys that we think have a chance to see the field and be in the 2 deep right off the bat.
So you thinking? So this is 24 and 25 class people who haven't really played before. Yeah.
Yep.
Are we including transfers at all in this?
I mean, you can if you want. If you feel, do we have any that are
Not
24
really.
class? Not really.
No, I don't think
And
so.
I'm gonna put this out there right now because I know Doherty's in the chat. Haywood ain't gonna be on the list. He's automatic. Like he's already been stamped into this. He's got left tackle.
Obviously, he's not in the 2 deep. He's in the starting role.
So I'm taking him off the list right away because he doesn't count because we already know he's gonna play.
All right. So let's start. Go ahead. Give me your first guy. Let's try to put them in somewhat kind of order of like most confident that they're going to get on the field and into the 2 deep at the very least, down to least confident maybe. So who's one of your top guys that you feel like is going to?
I mean, I think right off the bat you have to go Heiberger. He's a guy that I think honestly I will be shocked if he doesn't start, and if he doesn't start, then I'm going to have questions because I have seen that room for the last couple of years here. And there's nobody that I've seen in that room that is a more athletic player than him at that position. So you need to get your athletes on the field.
Yeah, I'll stick with the linebacking core. For me, it's the guy that you've heard me talk about from a lot. He was on the show. He's my favorite recruit in the class, Mason Posa. Yep. I struggle to find a way. I struggle to see a situation where he doesn't enter into the middle linebacker 2 deep. The middle linebacker is not a very deep position. Listen, there's a guy right there. There's a serious player right there. We've talked last week on the show, Sunday, Wisconsin linebackers. Look at the all-pro performances you've been seeing. This is the kind of guy that way down in the future has that ceiling, that potential to be an NFL player. And I think he absolutely gets on the field next year.
Yeah, I think that room is deeper than you give it credit for. I think Janzi's got a chance to be a guy that can be in there. I think Landon Gauthier has some talent. But I do agree with you that I think that Posa is going to be in the 2 deep. I just think he's that talented.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of guys there that I look like that can be solid players. Posa is a guy who can be a difference maker.
Let me give you my number 2 here, and it's Nicholas Clayton. I'm sticking with the 25 class. I think that, look, we've talked about pass rush a ton. We don't need to relitigate this. We need pass rush. We don't appear to have one, but a guy like Clayton can really be a difference maker athletically from a strength and speed perspective. I would say 2 deep for him. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter next year, but I definitely think in the 2 deep, in the mix, someone who, when I do my snap count stuff, right, we're going to see the snap counts slowly moving up for him. I do think he plays a part on this team.
I don't know if he's necessarily in the 2 deep. I would agree with him being put in some type of package or something. I do think he sees snaps. But it will be interesting to see how they use him and how they look at him. I watched him in that All-American game. For whatever reason, I think 247 said he only had 1 sack. He had 2 sacks. I've seen both of them on film.
It was 1.5, I think, officially. Yeah. I believe
it may have been. But he was the first guy there, and that guy was going down. The other guy just kind of came in cleaned up. But yeah.
So who's your number 2?
He's a monster. I would agree with him. He would be in my 5. But I would honestly, if I was going to take a look at it right now, I think there's going to be a chance. Let's see here. It's a good spot to go with this. Man, there's so like all the young linemen that are coming in this class. I would say that Hardy Watts is going to be a guy that's going to be in the 2 deep. I think that you can pick basically probably 3 or 4 of them. There's basically the entire group from last year and this year combined is going to make up the second line. But Hardy Watts, I think, is going to be in the 2 deep. Probably, I would guess either right or left guard as one of those guys.
One I'm going with from the 24 class is Emilio Agard. I mean, I feel like Agard, well, he's kind of needed at this point. But no, I think Agard will find his way in there. And then I'm going to give you another one along the same lines in the 25 class, sort of my number 3 here with those 2 guys combined, is Jamari Washington. 6'2" guy. He's got really good size. And we know that corner is going to be an issue. We know that we're going to see, in my opinion, a lot of different guys tried out in that position, short, small number of snap counts, building slowly. And I think Jamari Washington's a guy that it's again, 2 deep kind of a guy, not a starter, not necessarily getting a ton of playing time, but he's going to be nipping at the heels of some of these other guys, the guys that we brought in. Even the guys that we have on the team already. I feel like I'm pretty confident that I like him, especially of anything in the defensive backfield in the 25 class. He would be the guy I would pick.
I'm going to pivot on that one. I'm going Jay Harper.
Okay.
I really like the film on him coming in the 24 class. I don't think he was quite as refined as guys like Lucas and Gard were when they came in. They had a little more pedigree. There's a lot of raw physical tools with him. And he absolutely, like, he was the guy that came in third in that group. He would have been the best corner that would have come in one of our, like, under the previous coaching staff. And it wouldn't have been close because athletically, I feel like he's a guy that has NFL upside in terms of his physical tools. I just think he required a little more refinement than the other two. I think he's a guy that has a chance to challenge for one of the starting spots this year. It will be interesting to see what happens with Gard, whether they're going to put him in the slot position or they're going to put him on the outside. My gut instinct on him is he fits a little better in the slot because I think technically he's very strong in that position. And I don't necessarily love his long speed, but I think he's very twitchy and very quick and has good technique. So I think that he fits that role well.
I put this kind of pair. Steve Kneebone says Willer, Posa, Mandel, Cubberly, Clayton, Gard, Harper, Williams. Mandel,
Cubberly and Mandel are already on the two deep, so it's
I feel like they're already in there for sure. I agree. Williams is an interesting one. I did write down Jalen Williams. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he's? I know you like Williams. You like Williams a lot.
I will say this: I think he's going to he's going to get reps just because I don't want to say there's promises that were made, but like when you get a recruit of that caliber, I feel like there was talk that we're going to find a way to get you on the field with a guy like that. Like he's.
I mean, it's hard to make that kind of a promise.
It is
to a freshman on a line. Like I don't know, but
I think he's got that kind of upside though too. Like his movement abilities for a guy his size are unique, I guess would be the best way to put it. He's got some freak ability. Now he's going to have to get stronger, and I question his technique, but the athletic tools are there for him to be a guy.
Murph says, do we get another transfer quarterback next year, or does Carter start at Lambeau Field against Notre Dame? I think we still have O'Neal. O'Neal has a lot of eligibility left as well, by the way. So my last one, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. I don't really know if he's going to get in the two deep because we've got a lot of people there still. I'm very curious more than anything else to see how Eugene Hilton performs early on, and whether he just is sitting out for the year and he's not really going to be involved. I'm not sure if he's going to rolling early or not, if he's going to be involved in the spring. I hope he is. But what are your thoughts on him? Do you think he has a chance to get in there? I don't really know how I feel about him, but I put him at the bottom of my list.
It's so hard to look at the wide receiver room with a change in offensive philosophy and how Grimes may look at guys. I think he's going to love Chris Brooks because Chris Brooks can block like a machine out there. He's got a big body and he catches the ball fairly well. He's not a super fast guy, but he's a guy who can be physical and go make plays. So I think he has a chance to potentially make a leap. Joseph Griffin, we didn't get the chance to see last year. He should be eligible this year. He's a guy that's a big-bodied wide receiver that Grimes really likes that. He has a chance to be out there. So there are bodies that we didn't really get a chance to see last year that have an opportunity to find a new life with this offense. And anyone who watched Kansas last year and what they got to do, they had a guy on the outside that was 6'5", they had a guy that was 6'3", and then they had a slot guy who was 5'11", 6 foot. So he likes having those big weapons out there. So we'll see what happens.
Of all those guys you just mentioned that you didn't get to see last year, who's the one you want to see the most? Is it Heiberger? Is that the person you're most like wanting to see play on the field, or is there someone else you're like, I'm dying to see that guy and what he has?
I'm absolutely dying to see Clayton play because he's one of my guys from this. And I have all the faith in the world that Williams is going to be a monster by the time he leaves Wisconsin. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do it right away as a true freshman. He's a guy that feels like in a year is going to be a machine. I just don't know if it's going to be day one. I really like Heiberger. I think he should be the guy on the outside this year. And I really look forward to it. If he comes in at 235 to this season, we're going to see some things out of him because he's got that type of body and that type of frame with his explosiveness that he could be a problem.
JB says Heiberger is the next Bosa. Wow. I mean, geez, JB,
That's
that's aggressive. That's aggressive.
I would love it if he is. Don't get me wrong. Wisconsin gets that type of defensive lineman. That is the type of player that takes a very average defensive line and suddenly makes it above average on its own.
Bo Dragon says, what has Tressel shown you that makes you think he can get 10 new starters to play team defense? I miss Jim Leonard and his bad recruits at linebacker that went into the NFL every year. Yeah. Listen, we all miss Jim Leonard. There's no doubt about that. This is a prove it year for Tressel. I mean, he's going to have to prove what he can do. I mean, otherwise he's not going to be here. I mean, if Fickell can't prove what he can do, he's going to have a hard time being there. Anyone else on your list, Justin, that you wanted to touch on?
I think we got most of the guys. There's some guys who I would normally say are probably have a pretty good shot at it. I think both the safeties coming in this class have an opportunity to see some time. With us adding bodies in that, it's harder to kind of get a feel for how that's going to play out. I believe both of them are coming in the spring here, so they'll have an opportunity to kind of get acclimated and prove themselves, which helps a lot. Some of the guys that we would likely want to see are not necessarily going to have an opportunity. Guys like Pavey, who's not going to be in until the summer. And honestly, it's so hard to figure out the defensive line right now. Like anybody who says they have a feel for what the two deep is going to be on the defensive line, they're lying to you. I don't think that anyone, even the coaches, know which of these guys are going to shake out and be the starters, because you've got like 6 new bodies in a room that was not great last year. So I think you look at it, and even same thing with the edge guys. I think Reiger is going to be like, I will be shocked if Peterson is one of the starters. It could happen. I just don't think that you're being honest with yourself if he's one of the guys. Because if Reiger's healthy, to me, he's just a superior guy at that position. Heiberger is more athletic.
He has the potential to be. I mean, he's more of a hand in the dirt kind of guy, but he does. I agree. Will Hanna, I like. We haven't talked about this guy yet.
He played 2-point stance though a lot at Louisville.
That's true. He says we need Lane to take a step. That would be really nice. We could really.
He's the big body. He could be a 315 guy, and I don't think they have one of those other than him.
Yeah,
unless Okponu comes in and is suddenly, 315.
Yeah, Bo says, how can you realistically count on freshmen to make a difference on D-line playing against a junior 5-star O-lineman from Bama? I don't expect them to beat the O-lineman from Bama.
I think you're hoping to get 10 reps on them.
I expect the upside, truthfully, is what I expect. Let's move on and talk about
Bama's not who you're planning for. We were 5-7 last year.
Right. If you're just joining us live and you're here to listen about Xavier Lucas, that was the first 20 or 25 minutes of the show. So check that out. So we started out 0-2, Greg Gard's team did. And then we haven't lost in a while. 7 straight wins for the Badgers. Currently ranked 24th. In the morning, will probably be somewhere around 20. I don't know who lost ahead of us, but we're definitely going up in the polls after 2 more wins this week. Going to UCLA as part of our West Coast swing on Tuesday. I'm going to be at that game. A couple of people have already reached out and said they were going to go. Definitely hit me up if you are going to be out there. Would love to meet people. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's going to be a tough place. It's not really a daunting place to play, but that team is better than USC, I think, even though their record doesn't necessarily show it. Justin, thoughts on the USC game? It was an interesting one where the first half was huge. Second half, we had that thing again where we gave it up, but it ended up being a comfortable victory for us.
So what I will say is my biggest takeaway, it's the first time I've seen Tanjay just look completely ineffective. Like he really didn't look like he was even challenging much in that game, which is fine. It shows Wisconsin's capable of working around him if they have to, but he does feel like he's kind of slumping a little bit. Like I know he's been 18 plus, but he's more inconsistent now than what we were used to. We talked about his efficiency very much so earlier in the season, and now it seems like he's kind of sputtering at times. Like he'll have a good game, he'll have a bad game. He'll have a good game, he'll have a bad game. Getting to the free throw line has kept him relevant in some of the games. The guy you need to really look at is Blackwell. And my question to you with this is, do you think there's a chance that he plays well enough the rest of this that he may make the leap?
I really hope not.
He's up to 16 a game now?
He is up to 16.1 a game. I don't think that he's quite ready for the league. Now, again, I am not a big NBA guy, so it's a better question answered by you and Ryan, who watch NBA much more religiously than I do. But as far as the athletic tools that he has, he's a guy that can get there. But I think he would drastically be benefited by having one additional year, one additional step, and then all of a sudden you can talk to him about becoming a first round draft. So
I think that he has the chance to be a first round draft pick. I question whether there's enough there athletically. Like he's a very skilled player already. He's not a guy that needs to build his skill. The issue that you would normally say with a guy that you want him to come back is because the athleticism is there, but they need to work on parts of their game. I think that his game is actually kind of where it's going to be mostly. He's going to get more efficient. He'll get better with it. He'll tighten some things up, but I don't know if there's not going to be a substantial leap in him. And that's why I look at it and I'm like, he's one of those guys I look at that I'm like, if he finishes really strongly to this season, I could see him being a guy that's like, I'm not going to substantially increase my draft stock. I'm not going to suddenly be a lottery pick type guy. He's when I watch him play, I look at him and I say, this is a guy that's in a rotation in an NBA. I don't think he's a guy who's going to be a starter or a star.
Which is why I don't think he leaves after this year.
Yeah. And that might be fair. That might be fair.
This team is special. I mean, let's just talk about that. First of all, there are all five starters are in double digits. All five of them, 10.7, 10.5, 10.4 for Winter, Klesmit, and Corral, respectively. Of course, Tanjay still leading at 17.2, but that gap is closing ever so quickly with Blackwell. Look, the team is well-rounded. It's veteran-laden. Yeah. It's a team that should do well in the tournament. And I think that to me is the big message. I said this on our reaction show on Locked On. I just think that this team has, in my opinion, not necessarily like they must, but I feel like they're a team. If you ask me, predict where they're going to end the season, it's the Sweet 16. I think we make it to the Sweet 16 because this team can shoot the lights out. It does mean that, you've got to make those and you can have issues. Will Hanna along these lines says if Whiskey shoots well, they can beat any team in the country. But they can avoid perimeter shooting droughts by going more to the low post when they are struggling. Yes, they absolutely do need to use the post more. Crowell and Winter were 9 of 11 in this game from the field. They should have taken 6 or 7 more shots between the two of them. There was no reason for that to stop there. They needed more touches.
The rebounding is still, let's be honest, is still an issue too. Like I think combined between two of them, they have like 7 boards or something like that.
I mean, for sure. And rebounding is an issue in general because of lack of effort, in my opinion. Not because I don't think we can. I just think that when at the beginning of that game in the first half, I made a note that says like, all of a sudden I saw the intensity when we were blocking people out. But after the halftime, it just didn't happen. And we really got to get out of this nonsense, like giving up a 17-point lead right away. Now, this one was a little bit better. They closed it to 4, and then we went on a run. Rather than trading baskets with them, we turned it up a little more defensively. We put some pressure on them. We took a 9-point lead, and then it just kind of grew from there, and we ended up winning fairly comfortably. But there are issues on this team. John Tanjay, you can look at it 2 ways. We won a road game in the Big Ten, which is always a good thing, with our best player arguably scoring 0 points. And at the same time, that's a problem. We can't have John Tanjay doing 0 because if I really
against think a better team, it's a problem.
I really do. Look, I would say this: it's a fluke. If it happens again, we have a problem.
Yeah,
I think he looked like he didn't have it. I said this to Ryan the other day. He looks like he didn't have it. He looked like he was taking like he was probing and taking one step, trying to beat his man off the dribble, and then he would just back up and say, "Nah, I don't have it. I can't." Why not try to go around that guy? He didn't have the confidence to be able to make those runs, to be able to make those dribble drives, to create that penetration. He didn't do it. If that trend breaks against UCLA and all of a sudden you see him go off for another 20 points or whatever, then we're fine and it's not a big deal. He is getting defended differently now. People are keying in on him. He's going to have to make those adjustments. And maybe that means, taking a quick step into stop and pop mid-range jumper, do something else, make a quick pass. Still has to be aggressive and penetrate because it can always create something other than just his shot. I'm not overly concerned with Tanjay, but it is something that you're like, okay, red flag. We need to watch this, right?
Yeah,
because
something to keep an eye on.
Because if you don't have Blackwell, because you have this whole sort of 2-headed monster with Blackwell and Tanjay. If you don't have that, it all of a sudden the success outlook, the ceiling outlook gets a little bit bleaker, if you will. JB says Tanjay's mid. This is the real Tanjay. Slow, methodical, clanks 3 points off the rim, doesn't finish drives, can get to the free throw line, can make free throws. That's what he is. I would say that's a very fair take, JB. I'm not there yet. I just don't feel like I need to see more of a sample size before I would say that that's true.
I would agree. I don't think he's necessary. I think he's a good athlete, but I think that the problem is if you get somebody who's a legitimate great to or good or great athlete on him with length, he struggles with that. And we've seen in games when he gets somebody equal size, he tends to do a pretty good job, or if they're slower than him, he kind of beats them up because he's kind of got that herky-jerky game where he ends up either getting body contact or he can get himself an open look or find a way to get to the rim. What I will say is this is where we're going to find out what Wisconsin's ceiling is with this team, because you look at it and you'd say they're more athletic than a lot of Wisconsin teams, but they're not necessarily as athletic as what you would look at for the top teams in the country, which is where I get a little bit of fear with this team. If they play a really athletic team, and we saw this kind of early in spurts with USC before they settled in, when USC put their length out on the perimeter and really got into them guarding for a little bit, we struggled a little bit to get the ball inside and be able to get easy scores. Now JB or Blackwell was able to hit some threes, which absolutely helped this team open things up on the interior. But that's not going to always happen. You're going to have games when you're not hitting from the outside that you're going to have to find a way to get downhill and get to the rim against teams that are going to have some athletes. We'll see what happens when this gets this is something we may not know until we hit the tournament, where we end up maybe possibly getting a bad matchup. There's going to be some teams in there that you look at, and there are every year, that are teams that are more athletic that just get hot, and they've been kind of inconsistent all year long and suddenly start playing better. That's where we'll find out what Wisconsin truly is. But it's a weak league. I think that overall, it's a weak season. I don't really know who the dominant team is in college basketball for the most part. There's a couple.
I definitely disagree with you there. I would say flip that. I would say that's why to me it's a very strong league and it's a very strong season because
for the league, yes, I think the league, but I think that what I mean by that is there's no, like last year when we had UConn looking like an absolute, we can just go out there and blow everyone off the court. There's not a bunch of teams like that this year where you look at there's 3 or 4 teams that are like, these guys are clearly the best teams in the country. We don't have any of that this year. I feel like there's a lot more parity on this season in general than what we're used to. So it's really hard to look at this season and say, well, they run into them, that's going to be a problem. You would have said that with Arizona to start the season. Well, yeah, Arizona looks very average right now.
By the way, I love Big Ten basketball. I think you've heard me say many times, I really, really care a lot about the league. And I think the regular season Big Ten champion is the most impressive thing, like much more impressive than any tournament win, like the Big Ten tournament for sure. Obviously the NCAA tournament's a different thing, but I love the league. I love watching the standings. I just wish we had balanced schedules, like just play 17 games, and just play every team once and call it a day. You don't need the 20. I'd rather see that so it's balanced. And then you flip-flop the home and away the following year. And you just do that every year. And you rearrange them so there's different things. But I do really like that. I think the 2 things that concern me the most about this team, Justin, flat out, blocking out is an issue. My God, the turnovers. When did we become a team that's turnover happy all of a sudden? Come on. I appreciate, and I will say this, when you play an up-tempo system that we're now playing, when you have this go kind of offense that Kirk Penny's installed along with Steemsma and Gard, you're going to turn the ball over more. So we're not going to be a team that turns the ball over 8-9 times a game anymore because we simply have more possessions, and that's going to happen. You're playing with speed. That being said, a lot of those are very avoidable, and I really don't like that, and I think that's got to be something that gets cleaned up. Otherwise, this team is going to struggle. I'm very happy with where we are in the league right now. We're sitting in, I believe, 4th. Obviously, Michigan State's kind of running away with things right now. But, Michigan almost lost to Minnesota, by the way. That's crazy. UCLA and USC are both discovering that the Big Ten is a real conference, obviously. But there's a lot of things to touch on.
Do you think that they alter the way this league plays? with the style of those teams coming in, do you think it changes things? I'm not saying that I think that those teams are going to be dominant. I'm saying that I look at it and I'm like, do we see like the teams kind of look at it and be like, maybe we can change a little bit to be a little bit more like this, and it's going to help us come March? Because I do think that the way that the Big Ten plays at times negatively impacts how we end up playing in March. The game is just, number one, is reffed a lot different in March. Like, you don't get away with the physicality that the Big Ten typically plays with in March Madness. It just doesn't work out that way. And because of that, I feel like teams struggle not being able to play the same way because it's a much more wide open game in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that question in a second. I want one correction. Michigan did lose to Minnesota. Yeah. They almost lost to Northwestern today, at home, albeit, which is bananas. I don't really think it changes. I think Oregon is the one team that I think I worry most about with and coming in and kind of looking at style. But ultimately, they're going to adapt to us. We are a conference that historically doesn't have the best record in the NCAA tournament. So there's that piece of it. And maybe we do need to adapt our game. I think it is changing. And maybe the fact that there's just more teams in the league, not necessarily those 4 teams, but just more teams, more competition. Maybe you do have to evolve, which I think will happen. But look, a lot of excitement. I don't have anything exciting in my sports life except the Wisconsin Badgers basketball team. So let's hope that goes.
You're praying that does not tail off this year.
I am like all in on Badger basketball right now. So going to UCLA, leaving Tuesday morning, heading out there. So that's
you can follow women's hockey. They're a dominant force.
Well, yes, of sports that I follow regularly. To be honest, I certainly don't.
Well, maybe it's worth picking up because we know that they're every year going to be one of the top 3 teams in the country.
Right. We'll close the show with this, Justin. College football playoff tomorrow night. Ohio State and Notre Dame. What is your prediction, and what are you rooting for?
I think Ohio State wins this game comfortably. I think it's going to be probably double digits. I'm not going to say it's going to be crazy. It'll probably be 10 points, though. I just think they're more talented, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's totally close.
And are you rooting for them?
Yeah, because I want the Big Ten to get back-to-back, because I think that starts to make it starts to put a little bit of a ding in the armor of the SEC when you see the Big Ten win 2 in a row.
Oh, it's not a ding in the armor; it's a straight punch to a dent.
Oh, they got
a major dent in the armor.
And I love seeing Josh Pate talk about how, well, these upsets, they don't. It's not the best team winning. It's like, well, they're not the best teams if they're losing these games. Like it's not rocket science here. Like, you talk about them being the most talented teams. Typically, what ends up happening when you get in these games is they run away with it and just blow the other team off the field. Like, the best team plays way better because they're locked in, because it's a game that matters. We saw this happen multiple times with Wisconsin against Ohio State. Wisconsin would stand a better chance in the regular season when it doesn't matter as much. They get to the title game, and unless Wisconsin had one of its best teams like 2017, Ohio State would just run them over because they're more talented and the players were locked in, because it's like there's something actually at stake here. That's harder to do in the regular season. And what we're finding out is this year, at least, the SEC had a bunch of teams that were just not that great. And we kind of saw that during the season. I didn't see anybody that I really looked at in that conference that I'm like, this is a dominant team. Georgia was the closest thing.
I've always said that the SEC has certainly been very top heavy. They've won championships many times, many years in a row. That's fine. But the depth of that league was always incredibly overrated, because, it's like CBS Sports, the SEC, the massive matchup between Arkansas and Ole Miss. No, it's not a massive matchup. Just calm down with your SEC bias. It's nice to see it happen. I'm absolutely rooting for Ohio State. I agree with you completely. I think it's a 13-ish point victory. Look, they were the best team in the country all year. That Oregon game was in Oregon, and it was a 1-point game, and that could have gone either way. Oregon's certainly a very good team. The Michigan game complete fluke. I don't know what the hell happened. They were way too overconfident going into that Michigan game, and they got beat up by their rival, which is very embarrassing and still a stain on this year for sure.
Well, it got them rolling like this.
They are the best team in the country. They've rolled through the playoffs, and I think they're going to roll through the playoffs again tomorrow. We will leave it there for the week. We'll be back again next weekend to talk more about the Xavier Lucas situation. Again, check that out. It's the beginning of the episode. That's going to be lots to talk about there, certainly as things progress. Thank you all for joining us today. And as always, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.